Number 7. Tiger WYLDE. One night in the country of Latveria in the year 2099, a portal opened, spitting out a man dressed as the long-disappeared ruler of Latveria, Victor von Doom. Despite the fact that the man under the mask was far too young to be the real Doom, he somehow had all the original's powers and memories. He set about reclaiming his throne, as he soon discovered that the country was under the control of a dictator named Tiger WYLDE. Tiger had been a high-level executive for the evil Alchemex Corporation before leaving the company and taking over Latveria. Although he had saved the nation from being taken over by the corporate forces that had seized control of many of the planet's other nations, he now ruled the nation with an iron fist, squashing any who dared oppose his rule. Doom used his power armor to cut through Tiger's security to get to the new Latverian ruler. He confronted him, but was shocked when Tiger turned out to be a cyborg with enhanced strength and the ability to redirect the energy in Doom's suit to overload him and take him out of commission. He removed Doom's mask, seeing that this man who seemed to have all of Doom's memories was not disfigured. He took the opportunity to make the new Doom more historically accurate before having him sent away. It was only through the help of WYLDE's tarot reader, Fortune, that Doom was able to survive, upgrade his equipment, and eventually overthrow WYLDE. There are other 2099 villains more powerful than Tiger WYLDE, but the fact that he was able to take over a country and defeat Dr. Doom in combat makes him worth mentioning. By the way, Doom isn't on this list as he doesn't really do anything too villainous in the 2099 timeline. Number 6. FEARMASTER. Daryl King was a board member of the dictatorial Alchemex Corporation in charge of the private police force known as Public Eye Unlimited. At the same time, he was also secretly leading the criminal cartel known as Cyber Nostra, proving that even in the future you need 2 jobs to make a decent living. Daryl used his unique position to play both sides and enrich himself while avoiding detection, going under the alias FEARMASTER for his criminal activities. He was given a mutated hand by an alien entity called Kelmizadek, which let him calcify or turn people's flesh into minerals such as gold, stone, and everything in between. It also let him de-age people. He called this power the Midas Touch, and used it to create a display room called the Endymion Room, where he kept the altered dead bodies of all the women he had touched and transformed over the years. He was one of the main antagonists for the 2099 Punisher, although he mostly fought the Punisher with his connections and by sending hired assassins after him rather than directly confronting him. Even so, he is a powerful villain both due to his political power and his superpowers. Number 5. Goblin. The 2099 version of Spider-Man has 2099 versions of several of the original Spidey's enemies, such as this version of the Green Goblin, simply known as Goblin. The Goblin is really a Catholic priest, Father Jennifer D'Angelo. Her goblin suit was the source of her powers, which allowed her to fly with giant purple wings and shoot energy blasts at her enemies instead of pumpkin bombs. The suit also granted her super strength and was capable of projecting hallucinations, an ability she used to trick Spider-Man into attacking civilians that she had made look like her. Her goal is to replace Spider-Man as the defender of downtown Nueva York, as she believes that Spider-Man is a corporate tool, but her methods and willingness to team up with criminals like the 2099 Vulture earn her a spot on this list of villains. Number 4. FLIPSIDE. During the heroic age, an android called FLIPSIDE was created and programmed to emulate the powers of whatever superhero it first came across. It was eventually found by a band of thieves who believed the robot was broken. It was actually still in scanning mode, trying to find a hero that matched its records. When FLIPSIDE encountered the Spider-Man of 2099, he scanned him but had trouble recognizing him as he clearly was not the original Spider-Man he had on file. In order to complete its objective, the android combined the templates it had on file of the original Spider-Man and the original Venom to create its personality and power set. He came to life and jumped into Spider-Man's arms, declaring himself to be Spidey's new best friend. The merged personalities caused him to become psychotic, telling Spider-Man, "I'm gonna be your bestest friend for the rest of your whole life if that's okay with you, and if not, well fine, then I'll kill ya." When Spider-Man rejected him, FLIPSIDE began using his powers to kill all the nearby scavengers, seeming to shrug off their bullets. Spider-Man managed to defeat him, but once he left, FLIPSIDE merely reassembled himself and kept killing the scavengers.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Punisher. Even way off at the turn of the next century, Punisher's gotta punish. Frank Castle no longer wears the gigantic skull, instead it's a guy by the name of Jake Gallows, which is appropriate. This ex-Thorite actually grew up with Cecil McAdams as his reverend, but we'll save that story for a rainy day. He lost his family to violence and then came across the old war journals of the original Punisher. With this, he decided he would dedicate his life to punishing. At first, he was a member of the pay-per-use police service, but eventually ended up as Doom's Minister of Punishment. As one would expect, this makes it very dangerous to be deemed a criminal in the future. Strapping, angry, and constantly firing guns in both hands, the Punisher does what he does best. Hell, he even has a hand in killing the new Thor. Coming in at number 2, we've got Spider-Man. If you want a crazy origin story, look no further. In the future, there's one company that seems to have an upper hand over the rest. Alchemax. Miguel O'Hara was a scientist working for them, reluctantly performing genetic experiments on less than willing test subjects. After turning a man into a horrid beast that died quickly, O'Hara decided he'd had enough. However, when discussing this with his boss, he accepted a drink that turned out to be laced with Rapture, a highly addictive substance that bonds with the DNA of the person using it. This was supposed to keep O'Hara addicted, and therefore an employee of the company that produced it for the foreseeable future. In order to reverse this addiction, though, O'Hara attempted to rewrite his own genetic code. This procedure was sabotaged by his boss, but ended up including some spider DNA in the process. Thus, Spider-Man 2099 was born. Jam-packed with spider powers, but actually lacking any form of spider sense, O'Hara decided to start fighting crime. Donning a spider suit to hide his identity, he puts his powers to use. Increased strength, agility, stamina, regeneration, some telepathy, claws and fangs, and even spinnerets that generate organic web, and more. Spider-Man is always a fan favorite, that's for sure. Finally, at number 1, we've got Dr. Doom. Unlike most of the other heroes on this list, Doom isn't a clone or a copy or even offspring of another individual, it's still Doom. After disappearing for decades, Dr. Doom decided to upgrade his armor and make a triumphant return, and triumphantly return he does. Coming back in full force, he manages to retake the United States and force his way into a leadership role. Like I said earlier, he employs Jake Gallows as his Minister of Punishment and begins ruling with an iron fist. There really is no stopping Doom, even in the future. Coming in at number 10, we've got Metalhead. Have you ever wanted to be made of something other than flesh? Most of us have probably dreamed of that at some point, whether after an injury or because other materials just seem so much cooler and stronger. Well, Metalhead, also known as Eddie, is living all of our dreams. Originally a member of the X-Men, Eddie was the group's strongman, metal transformer, and resident comic relief. Not a bad gig, right? Eventually they ran into another group of mutants, these ones a result of some wonky genetic experimentation known as the Degens. Eddie fought one of these freaks, Contagion, who could infect folks with a psychoactive virus that disrupts people's cellular structure. Interestingly enough, Eddie had taken on a metallic form when he was infected by the virus, causing it to act differently than expected. Instead of killing him, it made it impossible for him to return to his human form. He took on an odd, alloyed appearance and remained entirely metal for the remainder of his days. This wasn't all bad though, as he decided that he would join the freak show to pursue a particularly attractive freak, and now he was permanently resistant to all physical damage. Plenty of interesting attributes come from being made of metal, especially when you can change the type of metal you're made of to your advantage. Titanium if you don't want to break, copper if you want to conduct electricity, you name it. Plus, Metalhead is a sweet name. Coming in at number 9, we've got FEARMASTER. Oh yeah, another excellent name. Working for Alchemax under the guise of Daryl King, this stylish and cruel super did all he could to leverage his power. As a board member and VP with his fingers in a lot of pies, he could easily be a supervillain without needing any sort of power. However, money and influence are just the beginning for FEARMASTER. Behind that conniving business person mask is the mind of a master planner. His intellect is quite formidable indeed. To make matters worse, he was granted a mutated hand by the alien Kelmizedek, which allowed him to do a lot of heinous things. This strange alien hand granted him the power to calcify flesh, which is as grisly as it sounds, turn humans into minerals of his choosing, and even de-age elderly people. That last one could be used for a lot of good, but it's not often that FEARMASTER does good. In fact, he often uses his powers to create statues from the corpses of beautiful women, which he then puts on display. So he's got corporate power, transformative power, and a mind to put it all together. Just hope that you never get targeted by this megalomaniac. Coming in at number 8, we've got Serpentina. Another member of the 2099 X-Men, Kimberly Potters lives up to her name quite well. She could probably also be called something along the lines of Elastigirl, but I feel like we've seen that somewhere else. This green-clad super can extend pretty much every part of her body for a variety of uses. Scaling walls, bridging gaps, and of course, constricting enemies. There are more ways to use her powers, but I'll leave that up to you to figure out. She worked with the X-Men as they fought their way into the Singe Corporation to take revenge, and was fairly effective in helping her pals out. Unfortunately, this led to a run-in with Junk Pile, and things didn't go so well for our Teeny Tina. Her untimely sacrifice inspired a whole lot of new things within the X-Men. From Xi'an trying out his new healing abilities, to finally convincing Skullfire to permanently join their cause. She and Skullfire would meet again, but I'll leave that up to you to explore. Poor Serpentina. You could have done so much more if only you had time. Coming in at number 7, we've got Ghost Rider. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed that Nick Cage isn't the Ghost Rider in 2099. This implies that Hollywood's most controversial leading man doesn't make it until then, and that's just a shame. Thankfully, Ghost Rider is still wicked cool in the future and comes packing some new weapons and powers. Gone are the days that Ghost Rider is a literal magical skeleton flying around on his flaming motorcycle. In 2099, Vengeance got an update. Kenshiro Zero Cochran, computer hacker extraordinaire, ends up with his mind inside of an insanely powerful robot body. A Cybertech 101 warbot to be exact. And this robot is jam-packed with all sorts of futuristic weaponry, from eye lasers, to a hand that can transform into a whole bunch of weapons, to a retractable chainsaw embedded in his arm. Oh, and also a 50 caliber gun and grenades. Still a weapon for vengeance though, Ghost Rider manages to project the image of a flaming skull, just like the OG, using his holographic capabilities. Now that's how you future-proof your superhero. Coming in at number 6, Hulk. Our futuristic gamma-fueled beast is definitely a contender for strongest ever. However, unlike the original Hulk, he's not quite immortal. I won't get into the nitty-gritty here, but even a base power higher than the first Green Giant isn't enough to keep you alive against all odds. Too bad too, because this is a really cool reimagining of a classic hero. In 2099, a movie producer named John Eisenhart decides he wants to do a movie about the Knights of Banner. This group worships Bruce Banner like a god and tends to move around all over the place. When Eisenhart finds out he can't get the rights to their story, he turns them into the police, but feels guilty afterwards. He tries to find a way to help them out, but gets caught in the blast of a gamma bomb, turning him into a brand new green monstrosity. He's got more base strength than the original Hulk, sharp teeth and claws useful for ripping and tearing, and even holds onto his human intelligence once transformed. Able to lift up to 150 tons and leap hundreds of feet in a single bound, this version of the Hulk is a force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 5, we've got Thor. This might come as a bit of a surprise, but in the future, a lot of people worship superheroes. And a lot of the time, those who revere these supernatural figures are interested in attaining these godly powers for themselves. In 2099, a subset of people have decided to give themselves to Thor, mind, body, and spirit. Known as members of the Church of Thor, or Thorites, they all have the hallmarks of many other major religions, down to the places of worship and religious leaders. Cecil McAdams was a reverend of the Church of Thor, and was actually chosen to take up the mantle of the Norse god of thunder himself. Through technological advances and a whole lot of self-deception, McAdams ended up with almost identical powers to the god that he worshipped. This resulted in some less than stellar mental issues though, as he went a little power crazy and tried to rid an entire city of mortals. Coming to number 4, we've got Exodus. Born as Bennett du Paris back in the 1300s, this mutant is all about changing up the world order. He has and always will believe that mutants should be in charge of the world, with humans as the inferior race. This was true before 2099 and remains true in said futuristic world. Showing up after a long sleep, Exodus attempted to force his rule upon X Nation. They weren't too happy with this, so Exodus defeated them. Using telepathy, teleportation, and resurrection, he's almost undefeatable. Factor in that he refused to save the humans before Mademoiselle Strange teleported the survivors away, and you've got one bad, powerful dude. Coming in at number 3, we've got Captain America. Here's an interesting hero. 2 personalities in one, supplemented by the forced injection of super soldier serum, fighting as a part of Alchemax's adventures. That's a more complicated Cap than we've seen in a while. Roberta Mendez was married to an Alchemax operative who made her take the super soldier serum. The thing is, Roberta doesn't know about her secret identity as Captain America. She's got 2 personalities inside of her own and Cap's. And when somebody says the phrase Avengers Assemble, old red, white, and blue bursts forth. When this happens, her peak physical form gets to shine. See, the serum does exactly what it did to Steve Rogers way back in the day. It pushed past all human limitations to create a soldier that simply can't be beat. This sometimes surprises Roberta, but she doesn't question it too much. Well, at first anyways. Once the deed is done, someone can say Cap to Roberta and she'll return to her normal self. Or they can say he's the boogie woogie bugle boy from Company B if they're feeling cheeky. Coming in at number 2, we've got Daredevil. If you want to subvert expectations, this is a good way to do it. Long after Kingpin finally dealt with Matt Murdock, a new Daredevil appeared. This red-covered nightcrawler is the descendant of one of the two people I just mentioned. Can you guess which one? If you guessed the original Daredevil, Matt Murdock, you'd be wrong, which leaves you with one other answer: Fisk. This time it's Samuel Fisk, grandson of Wilson. He grew up hearing his father recount his grandfather's triumph over the hero of Hell's Kitchen and always felt guilty about it. So with his considerable inheritance, he made himself a battlesuit and began to fight crime in a similar manner. However, with crime on the downswing in 2099, thanks to some Sentinels, and Samuel being the latest figurehead of his family's crime empire, this led to mixed results. There was another 2099 Daredevil though, the grandson of Murdock's friend Foggy Nelson, who fought against corporate criminals instead of street-level ones. And finally, we've got Venom. The symbiote returns, and it's got a bunch of new tricks too. This time it chooses Kron Stone as its host. Kron is quite the choice considering that he's Miguel O'Hara's half-brother and was the man to call the hit on Jake Gallows' family. What a fun little connect the dots in 2099, right? All the classic Venom powers are here with a new acid-spitting power to round out the arsenal. In fact, a lot of Kron's influence seems to give Venom acidic properties overall, all the way down to his blood.
Number 10. Creation. Stan Lee came up with the idea for Marvel 2099 when he began to collaborate with John Byrne on Ravage 2099, a comic that was intended to explore the future of the Marvel Universe. It was the early 90s and society was becoming worried about what the next millennium would hold, and Stan wanted to explore that and try to reassure the population that things would be fine, so he decided to explore the later years of the 21st century. The collaboration with John Byrne fell through, however, but Stan was onto something and wanted to pursue the idea further. Joey Cavalieri was very enthusiastic and put himself on the sheet for an entire Marvel 2099 collection, and Joey became responsible for overseeing it. It started in 1992 and concluded in 1996, and had a whole roster of heroes, both old and new. But if it ended in 1996, then why are we talking about it now? Well, that leads me into number 9, being revived in November. Revealed at the Diamond Retailer Lunch at San Diego Comic-Con, the Marvel 2099 comics will be getting revived and getting new releases starting in November of 2019. This was announced by Marvel with the teaser, 80 years ago it was 1939. 80 years from now, it will be 2099, demonstrating that we are currently at the halfway point between the beginning of Marvel and the furthest point we've seen. Not much is known about what comics will be coming back at the time of recording, but it's safe to say that the original lineup of Doom 2099, Punisher 2099, Ravage 2099, and Spider-Man 2099 can be expected, but for sure the last one. Spider-Man was the most popular 2099 incarnation, and has been in several other forms of media after the series ended, even being transported to present day for a time. Who do you want to see come back in 2099, or even someone new in 2099? Let me know in the comments. Also, someone count how many times I'm going to be saying 2099. Number 8, why it stopped. Marvel 2099 was one of the casualties of war as Marvel Comics battled with potential bankruptcy, as changes in leadership came almost on a weekly basis. As a result of the potential loss of the company, they had to downsize. Joey Cavalieri was one of the people let go, and basically every other writer who had to do with 2099 resigned in support of Joey. Marvel hired replacements to wrap up 2099 over the next little bit. Despite it only running for a few years, it was hugely successful overall. Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara has appeared many more times after this, be it as an interdimensional superhero with a team called the Exiles, or as the star of his own book. The timeline has lost some cohesiveness, however, due to the lack of constant editorial direction, but Marvel, I'm sure, will aim to improve that with their new releases, hopefully.
Coming in at number 7, we've got Skullfire, and speaking of him, let's talk about him. Also known as Timothy Fitzgerald, Skullfire was once a goofy yuppie living with his girlfriend. His mutant powers awoke in the most unfortunate way possible and killed his girlfriend in the aftermath. It turns out he's got the ability to absorb ambient energy and disperse it in destructive blasts. Sheesh, what a wake-up call. At first, he could only use this power during stressful moments or when he was otherwise agitated. With the help of some other mutants though, he was able to get a better handle on his powers and use them with ease. This newfound power caused a shift in his personality too, giving him a devil-may-care attitude that often put him in very dangerous situations. Eventually his body was destroyed, but that wasn't the last of Tim. A ball of energy remained and was able to reconstitute his physical form. This new form had even more powers and could levitate with ease. Talk about personal growth. Coming in at number 5, we've got Ravage. Created by the legendary Stan Lee himself, Ravage is a superhero born from radiation. Shocker, right? Once the CEO of ECO, a subsidiary of Alchemax that was meant to help deal with environmental concerns, Paul Philip Ravage had it all. Over time, he noticed that there were some shady dealings happening within his company, and when he started to investigate, he was framed for a crime he didn't commit and had to go into hiding. Following exposure to radioactive materials, Ravage developed a bevy of wicked powers, including the ability to transform into a massive man-beast. He was surgically granted the ability to fire blasts of biokinetic energy from his hands, too. With physical abilities far beyond those of an average individual, Ravage is a combat expert. Add in retractable claws and incredibly sharp senses, and you've got one majorly strong superhero. If only he didn't retain some of his regular human limits. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Fantastic Four. One might expect that there'd be a brand new team of fantastic fighters in the future, but that's not exactly the case. Just like with Doom, these are the original supers from way back when, somehow brought into the year 2099. They retain all the powers they had when they started, making them invaluable to their allies. However, finding their way in the future proves to be quite a challenge. How did they get there? Where do they go next? Well, if any superhero can find out the answers to these questions, it's the Four, so strap in and get ready for some interesting twists.
In at number 3, Cause the Spider-Verse. With the undeniable success of Spider-Man 2099, you can honestly say that he could be the reason the Spider-Verse exists. Sure, the multiverse was going to happen anyway, but with Miguel they experimented, no pun intended, and it paid off. So they felt more confident to experiment in other ways, bringing Spider-Man into the noir scene for example, or making him a pig, I guess. You could contribute the continued use of Spider-Gwen and Miles to Spider-Man 2099 and the entire 2099 series in all honesty. While yes, Spider-Man was the most popular character from the 2099 series, the series helped show executives that experimenting and being creative is a good thing that pays off, especially when we've seen the same people fight over and over. Sure, you can throw a death in to spice things up, but if you bring a version of yourself who isn't even really yourself from the future into the mix, you've got something so spicy even the devil couldn't ingest it without ruining his rectum. In at number 2, Variations. With 2099 being so far away, especially when this series was created, the writers and artists could obviously take some creative liberties. More than normal at least. I should probably say that when talking about superheroes. For example, Dr. Octopus 2099 is not the spawn of Otto Octavius. In fact, he is a former Atlantean scientist and an expert in xenobiology, and looks like an actual octopus. He appears in Spider-Man 2099 number 1 as well as Spider-Man 2099 Civil War 2. Electro 2099 is not a human, but in fact a service android who was hit by a burst of electricity, causing him to gain electricity powers and sentience. Doom 2099 is a freaking president, and Captain America is a woman who leads the Avengers and works as an employee at Alchemax, an evil corporation. The variations they threw into the 2099 heroes and villains are incredible, and they deserve to be celebrated in the new stories. Hopefully they don't change them up. At least too much. Finally, at number 1, How It Ended. We talked about why the series ended, but how it ended in comics themselves is totally mind-boggling. The series wraps up in 3099 with Miguel O'Hara doing his best to maintain peace in the universe. Yeah, you may be confused because I said the year 3099, which would mean Miguel is 1,000 years old, something that would normally only be achievable by a god, such as the god of thunder, Thor himself. Yes, while it may sound far-fetched, remember the writers of the projects had switched, so the writers that at the end were not the writers who had started the series. Where did these new writers take it, you ask impatiently? Well, the series wrapped up with 2099 Manifest Destiny, which was used to wrap up any loose ends it could, but also had Miguel O'Hara wielding Mjolnir and using it to hammer out peace in the universe over the course of 1,000 years. Yeah, the series ended with Miguel becoming immortal and pulling a cap. What the hell? Number 7, Reading Order. If you are familiar with the original Marvel 2099 comics, you may know of all the heroes that were used. Some were brought back, some in other forms, and some were created new for this series. The whole of Marvel 2099 had 271 issues, and actually has a reading order if you're looking to catch up. I obviously can't read out the full order, but here are some notable points. It starts with Spider-Man 2099 issues 1 to 3, followed by Doom 1 and 2. After that, Ravage, who was a new character for the 2099 series, issues 1 to 3, Punisher 1, and then Spider-Man 4 to 9. Later on, you will get 2099 Unlimited number 1, which seems to be more of an Avenger style comic, and and then after a few more issues, Unlimited number 2. After that, you'll need Punisher 7-9, Doom 10, and X-Men 2099 1-3. Skipping ahead to Unlimited 4, you'll find Thor Corp number 3, which seems to be more of a tie-in since the first two don't appear on this list. After Spider-Man 22, you'll get into Ghost Rider. There is a lot of comics to read and I can't list them all, so there is a link that you can go to in order to find the full order. It'll be in the description. And at number 6, released games. Spider-Man 2099 appeared in at least 2 games to my knowledge. The first one being Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, where you control 4 different versions of Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse. And its sequel, Spider-Man Edge of Time, which has you control Peter Parker and Miguel O'Hara. Miguel is by far a Spider-Man who is iconic in his own right, as well as a fan favorite, which would explain why he would appear more than his other counterparts, such as Spider-Man Noir. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions came out in September of 2010 for consoles and November 2010 for PC, and Spider-Man Edge of Time came out in October of 2011 for consoles, including the Nintendo 3DS, which is the console I used to play it. This game was honestly my first introduction to Miguel, and I was immediately fascinated by his story and Spider-Sona. While he has appeared in games, however, there is one game that was supposed to include him and others, and that brings us to number 5, cancelled game. The Marvel 2099 continuity was actually intended to have a game that was set to release in December of 1996. It was called Marvel 2099 One Nation Under Doom and was going to be for the PlayStation and Windows 95, developed by Mindscape Inc. It was to be loosely based on the storyline by the same name in the Doom 2099 comics, and was envisioned as a 2D side-scroller with 3D characters. By May of 1996, CD-ROMs and video demos were being shipped to game magazines for pre-release reviews, along with one-page brochures. The first demo was shown at E3 and had a playable level with the Punisher. The game was also supposed to have Spider-Man, X-Men, Ghost Rider, Fantastic Four, and Hulk 2099 as playable characters, along with 40 additional unnamed characters that would appear as NPCs. The game was never officially cancelled, however, as the production just slowed down and stopped due to financial troubles and layoffs occurring near the time of release. With the new launch, could we see a game similar to this be created?
Number 1, Alchemax. If you're fairly familiar with Marvel's 2099 continuity, you will probably have heard of Tyler Stone and Alchemax. Alchemax was originally an evil corporation that is often at the center of most conflicts in the 2099 world. That is, when Dr. Doom isn't. It's better than its 616 counterpart because it actually ends up being more important in the 2099 world. It also goes from being a corporation that provides many different services and products to consumers in a way that gives it an evil amount of power, they even have their own division of the police, to being run later by Miguel O'Hara, 2099 Spider-Man, and being repurposed as a good corporation. Meanwhile, on Earth 616, it's just a small fish in an ocean full of larger villainous threats.
Number 10, Venture. First up, we have this cyborg from the future. We first met Venture when he was going by the name Queeg and living in the ruins of Nueva York. Other post-apocalyptic people who talk about him say that he is one of the greatest hunters in the world in his time. He's not technically from the 2099 timeline, otherwise known as Earth 928, but is actually from an alternate possible future timeline that has been designated Earth 15,329. This timeline was created when Miguel O'Hara became trapped in our present day and couldn't get back to his version of the future. Miguel was able to create a portal that would let him travel to the future for 10 minutes at a time, but Queeg found out about this and set up camp in the future, waiting for the portal to open so he could go to our present day. And yes, I know how convoluted this sounds. This is why I generally don't like when Marvel tries to do time travel stories. When Queeg got to present day New York, Miguel recognized him as a villain from the future called Venture. Having not yet experienced this, Queeg was confused, but eventually decided that he liked the name so much that he adopted it, making Spider-Man kind of responsible for naming the villain through some weird time travel paradox. Venture is a gifted hunter and strategist whose cybernetic enhancements grant him increased strength and allow him to keep up with and go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man and the 2099 version of Captain America. He has had 5 appearances in the 2099 comics and therefore hasn't gotten the chance to show how capable he really is, but perhaps he can earn a higher spot in our future, which would of course be his past. Number 8. Jigsaw 2099. Originally known as Multi-Fractor, this villain was a Gravball player, whatever the hell that means, who made a turn to crime as an enforcer for the Cyber Nostra group. He was an experienced combatant who was able to effectively stand up to the 2099 version of the Punisher before eventually being killed by the futuristic anti-hero. His body was found by a mortician who had made a really bizarre career pivot into being a veterinarian. For some reason, this made him capable of bringing Multifractor back from the dead. He replaced one of the villain's arms with that of a gorilla and the other with a robotic one sporting a massive razor-sharp hook. He also seems to have giant goat legs for some reason. Despite being able to bring a dead guy back to life, the vet was unable to make the end result cosmetically pleasing, but Multifractor actually really dug his new look. He went after the Punisher again, but had adopted the name Jigsaw due to his stitched together appearance. He was a formidable foe for Punisher, but was eventually defeated and found by a gang who he took control of and led until ceding leadership to his old boss, the Fearmaster, but more on him later.
Number 6. Dr. Octopus. So, there's an interesting thing to understand about the 2099 universe, and that is that it's comprised of multiple Earths. There is Earth 928 and Earth TRN 590 primarily, but there's also a bunch of other ones. This is important to understand because there are some characters who are different depending on which Earth we are talking about, and TRN 590 has been used to change identities of characters or to retcon characters' backstories or even introduce some new characters. This villain, though, only exists in TRN 590 Earth. Not much is known about this version of Dr. Octopus, so you might be wondering how I know that they are better than our 616 Doc Ock, but that's a simple query to answer. They're actually a freaking octopus! Well, I mean, they're still humanoid, but this version of Doc Ock is an Atlantean scientist who is a humanoid octopus, so yeah, just basically the coolest looking and the most sensical in terms of his name. Number 5. Moon Knight. You don't need to know much about this version of Moon Knight to know how much cooler she is. If you are a fan of Moon Knight, you will know that he is often presented as someone who gets his power from the Egyptian moon god Khonshu, and thus the moon itself. Well, in 2099, this Moon Knight actually fights crime on the moon, where both immigrants of the Earth and the Inhumans reside. She defends those who live on the moon, acting as their protector. Many believe that she is actually a ghost. Oh yeah, and this version of Moon Knight is obviously also a woman. We never get to know her identity sadly, but imagine how powerful Moon Knight would be on the moon. What? Number 4. Vulture. The 2099 version of Vulture is just a more terrifying version than that of Earth 616. Not much is known about him, we don't even know his real name, but you don't need to know that to be scared of this guy. The Vulture of Earth 616, Adrian Toomes, is usually presented as being old and kind of frail looking, bald and lean like a vulture. 2099 Vulture, especially in Earth 928, is swole. A big muscle-bound man who stumbles upon a flying contraption that's possibly the one that was last used by the former villain of the main continuity. Who knows? This Vulture is also a cannibal, and was even a cannibal before he adopted the alias. All I can imagine is him circling a dying human and then swooping in for a bite of their flesh. Ugh, scary stuff.
Number 3. ELECTRO 2099. This version of ELECTRO is actually an android who was designed to be a construction worker. Unfortunately, his masters were not satisfied with his work, and much like the bosses here at Top 10 Nerd do when they aren't pleased with our performances, the android was sold to torture experimenters. No, really, haven't you ever wondered what happened to all the other hosts this channel has had? Only Amanda has a fan base big enough to keep her safe. Torture experimenters were people who used robots to test the effectiveness of the various torture methods they were developing in the dystopian nightmare that is Marvel's 2099. When the android was being tortured with electricity, however, the overload fried his obedience chip, making him self-aware and able to rebel against his masters. A generator accident gave him electric powers such as electrokinesis, energy absorption, and flight, and he took on the identity of Electro, joining the new version of the Sinister Six in order to take on the Spider-Man of 2099. Number 2. Venom 2099. Kron Stone is actually the half-brother of the 2099 Spider-Man, Miguel O'Hara. He is a ruthless psychopath who gets a perverse thrill from hurting other people. He was a mercenary working with the infamous Skin Posse until he was seemingly killed in battle and dumped in the sewer. It turned out that when he entered the water, he was not quite dead, and he floated through the sewer system until by total coincidence he came across the Venom symbiote that had caused Peter Parker all those troubles years ago. The symbiote had been hiding for years, maturing, but once it bonded with Kron, it transformed him into the new new Venom. He possesses all of the original Venom's powers, such as super strength, agility, web slinging, and the like, but as the symbiote has had more time to mature, it has also developed more powers that this Venom can take advantage of. The new Venom has acidic blood and saliva, not unlike the xenomorphs featured in the Alien series. He devoted himself to destroying the new Spider-Man's life by trying to kill him and his loved ones, even managing to fridge Spidey's love interest, Dana. Spider-Man soon discovered Venom's weakness to sonics and used the city-wide intercom system to defeat and capture his estranged brother. Number 1. Brimstone Love. In the 2099 timeline, one of the most twisted and evil sources of entertainment is the Theater of Pain. They used human misery as the main attraction, putting on sadistic displays for the crowd. Their leader is perhaps the most evil and ruthless of them all, Brimstone Love. He claims that he draws his power from the molten core of the earth, and he channels it into his powerful pyrokinesis. He used this ability to easily burn through the steel walls of the 2099 X-Men's headquarters and fight the mutant Skullfire. While Skullfire was able to draw his power from nearby energy sources, he soon exhausted all the nearby energy and was soon defeated by Brimstone, who has no limit to how much fire he can cast, due to his source of power being the earth itself. In addition to his pyrokinesis, Brimstone Love also has super strength and durability and teleportation powers, which allowed him to hold his own in a fight against the entire X-Men team, only being defeated once one of his own team turned against him and used the Theater of Pain's telepathic technology against him in X-Men 2099 issue 25.